Hi, my name is Adam Michael Anthony Simpson, and you're watching my YouTube channel, Adam M.A. Simpson. Today's episode will be featuring Wendy De La Rosa, a PhD candidate and behavioral scientist in Stanford's Graduate School of Business. Wendy is a Dominican American raised in New York and studies the consumer behavior of middle to low income individuals. This interview is enlightening on multiple levels. First, Wendy, prior to her pursuit of her PhD, worked as a successful investment banker at Goldman and Sachs. And then she decided to go back to school for her PhD in order to answer some intellectual questions that just kept on nagging at her. Now, not only is Wendy a successful academic, but she's also the host of Your Money and Your Mind, a new TED series. Wendy uses this platform to explain why we spend too much and save too little. Please check it out in the description box below. I hope you enjoy this interview with Wendy De La Rosa. Hey Wendy, nice to have you on the channel. So could you please introduce yourself? Where do you come from? What do you study at Stanford?
Thanks, Adam. Thanks so much for having me on this channel. I can't believe I made it to the short list. So hello, everybody. My name is Wendy De La Rosa. I am a fifth-year PhD student at Stanford at the business school. I study consumer behavior and specifically how average people make financial decisions. And I hail from the Dominican Republic and the Bronx. Kind of split my childhood there, so I have to represent both.
So can you explain what led you to grad school? I know you did some banking, investment banking before going to business school. So can you explain from, I guess, undergrad, what, influenced your decision to go to grad school and especially study what you study now, which is the consumer behavior of the average person?
So I think my path was not linear. I wish it were, but it wasn't. So I went to undergrad at Wharton and I was a finance and management major there. But I took a management class with a professor named Adam Grant, and I was
a good name.
He's great and has been a great mentor, but I was sort of like the annoying kid in his class, continually asking questions. And one of the things that he did, which I'm so grateful, he said, you could just answer those questions yourself. Come join my research lab. And at the time, his research lab was called Impact Lab. And it was my first foray into reading academic journals and just thinking about what's an interesting research question? How do you come up with a research question? How do you answer your own questions? And I remember my senior year, he and one of his PhD students, Justin Berg, kept telling me, you would be a really great academic. And I just remember laughing so hard because I was like, no, I'm gonna go make money. It's not.
You have to make this money.
The idea of doing a 5-year program after I just incurred all these student loans was just not realistic to me, and it was probably disrespectful, and I should apologize. But I laughed, and but I think they ended up having the last laugh because after I graduated, I started working at Goldman as a private equity investor. Was lucky enough to pay off my student loans fairly quickly. And I really enjoyed my experience as a private equity investor, but in the back of my mind, I kind of always had this thought just nagging at me of being a researcher and the freedom that comes with being a researcher and all of the things I could do with being a researcher. And so I quit, didn't know, things happen. I was like, all right, what am I going to do now? And I don't recommend anybody quitting without having anything else. But I was just kind of like, okay, I paid off my student loans. Like, let me actually explore what could be my deep passions. And so I went back to Adam. I maintained that relationship, and I said, hey, like, did you really believe I could be a good academic way back when? And he said, of course. And he sort of helped me to, he put me in contact with a couple of people to do consulting projects, to do research projects, and kind of set the train in motion so that I could start to build my resume in preparation for grad school applications.
And you touched upon something that's very important here, is that obviously with your job, getting that job at Goldman, you know, that gives you wealth, and with wealth you can make decisions that, you know, like you had this nagging to answer these questions, but before you graduated from undergrad, you were thinking of like, make this money. But then after you made this money, you're like, no, this question is important. So with wealth, you can answer those questions. So that's like that's something that I think people need to be cognizant of. I think that your story is very inspiring.
Yeah, you know what? I don't know if people should follow my path, right? Because there are some real costs to my path, right? I'm a little bit older. I don't want to say much older, but I'm a little bit older than some of my colleagues, right? It's a lot easier to pull an all-nighter when you're in your early 20s. And so there was definitely like a real time cost, right? But I think for me, and everybody is in a different, you know, life cycle, I just had personal milestones that I wanted to tackle before I went back to school. I wanted to pay off my student loans. I wanted to help my mom sort of not have to work as much as she did. And so there were just a couple of things that, you know, quite frankly, you can't do when you're in a graduate program.
That's true.
And that's one of the things that I think a lot of people don't know is when you're in a PhD, you actually get paid, right? And so I don't want to make it seem like you're groveling for pennies. No, like, you know, your cost of living is paid for, your housing to a certain degree is paid for, especially if you get a PhD at a business school. Like, that's one of the big advantages, right? But there is a difference, right, between being in finance and being a graduate student. And so I don't know. Yeah. And so I don't know if my path is right for everybody. But I mean, for me, I just knew what was realistic and what wasn't. And the one thing that I hope that people take from my story is not to just fall and never go back to your passions, right? Like, as long as you're very clear about what your end date is and what are the things that you want to accomplish before you get back to your passions, I think that could be, you know, a path that people can consider.
Thank you for that. And so, can you speak more about that transition to graduate school, like doing research after, you know, deciding to leave corporate? What was that transition like? What did you do in that period?
Yeah, the transition, when I first started at Stanford, it was pretty hard for a couple of reasons. I think one, you know, by the time I started my PhD program, I don't want to say established because I was so young, but I had generated some career success. But when you start off as a first-year PhD student, you're going back to the bottom of the totem pole, right? And so, like all of the I don't know, unfortunate tasks that no one else wants to do fall on you, and you know, it doesn't really matter what you did before. You're in this journey, and for me, that disconnect was really hard, right? It was like, oh man, okay, I am really starting from scratch again. And I think a couple of the other things that were hard for me were just I was away from my family. And in academia, there are so many benefits of academia, right? You control your time. You get to research the things that you are interested and passionate in. But there are a couple of drawbacks. And one of the drawbacks is that in our field, even when you're getting praise, you're getting criticism, right? And so when I submit a paper to a journal, the best news I could get is a revise and resubmit, which is good news. But even in that revise and resubmit, people are telling me all the things that were wrong with my original submission. And I just think academia is just a field of and that was difficult, right? Because in the corporate world, right, like people aren't always looking to tear someone down, right? Like they're looking to see, like, how can we make this project work, or how can we make this idea viable? Or, you know, they sandwich feedback with positive and negative feedback. But I think the constant relentless, like the constant criticism all of the time, I think mentally is just hard, right? Especially when you're not used to it.
Yeah, I can see that. That's it would be hard. That transition would be hard, especially if, you know, you're known for being successful somewhere, and then you're in academia where it's a world of its own. And like people only know each other in that bubble, and it's, yeah. Thank you for watching part 1 of this interview with Wendy De La Rosa. I hope you enjoyed. Please like and subscribe to this channel, and check the description box below for Wendy's specific answers to questions, and stay tuned for part 2 coming right up.